Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Kiel Majewski, the development director at the Heilicher Minneapolis Jewish Day School. We talk about some takeaways from his first trip to Israel last month, working at a small-town Holocaust museum, and discussing why he and his family picked Judaism on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Kiel, check out the new and improved TC Jewfolk merch store, with newly designed hats, shirts, stickers, and tote bags that help you look fun and stylish and help support TC Jewfolk's mission at the same time. Check it out at tcjewfolk.com/store. Kiel Majewski, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to talk to you. We had the sort of unusual experience of the first time we met face-to-face. We had talked over email. The first face-to-face meeting was not here in the Twin Cities. It was not at the Heilicher Minneapolis Jewish Day School where you work. It was in Tel Aviv at Hostage Square.
Hostage Square.
Last week while you were coming through at the Minneapolis Jewish Federation group, and I was leaving. I was on my way out of town after my week with Upstart and iCenter and Jewish Educators Project. Not the usual first meeting I have with someone like that.
Yeah, nor mine. I mean, it's my first time ever in Israel, so that's actually never happened to me before. It's great to see you there, though.
It was great to see you there. Being your first trip in Israel, how was the experience overall for you? Like, you've been back a few days now as we're sitting here talking. What's it been like for you coming home, and how are you sort of keep all of your thoughts straight about what you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely haven't kept them straight. I've been trying to make sense of them. For me, it was an amazingly positive experience. I had a lot of anxiety going to a country that's fighting a war right now, and a lot of my family members were like, "Are you sure it's safe?" And I'm just like, I assume they wouldn't bring us if it wasn't going to be safe, right? So, just trusting my life in the hands of other people, like Kara Rosenwald. I'm sure she's very trustworthy.
Kara's the best. She's trustworthy.
Right. So, as soon as I got there, though, it was really different. I felt very comfortable and surprisingly stable and secure. Like, everyday life is happening, but at the same time, it's a war. Like, anything could change at any moment. Like the whole time I'm like, am I going to hear a siren? Are we going to go into a bomb shelter? Whatever. That's where my mentality was coming in. But going through the country, like the entire experience, I have so much love for everybody who was part of that Tikvatenu delegation. So much love for all the people we met, and it's just it's like they say always happens. Like, once you go to Israel, you feel like you got to go back. So now I'm conspiring to try to get my wife there, and it was actually a lot of the Heilicher dads were conspiring to get
the families there.
Yeah.
Is there a Heilicher families trip or something in your future?
I don't know. It's we gotta work it into the strategic plan, I guess. But our 8th graders are going next year, so it was important for me to have that experience and be able to share with them. Because I'm sure they have similar anxieties to me. Yeah. So I actually just presented to our middle school 2 presentations back to back today. Okay. So it was my first chance to really start working out what this trip has meant to me. I feel like I'm carrying a lot, though. I mean,
It's something that, as a journalist, as a writer, written several, I think 6 pieces altogether about the experience, 2 lengthy Instagram posts with a bunch of photos from things I didn't write about. And it's hard. I don't think I've done a good job in trying to explain all of the feelings and emotions and sort of everything that comes with being there right now, because it's always been a really complex place, and any conversation requires a lot of nuance and forethought, because it's not black and white. It's almost all gray area. Right. And it's really hard, and I think trying to over time try to figure out a way to bring that message back to the kids and the families here at the school is really, I think, important for you, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, I mean, the kids in the school, our school community, to me, that's easy. That's an easy audience. The big thing that I felt compelled to do was, like, the narrative out there is wild, just wild. And I felt like, if I go and I experience for myself, and I have these stories, firsthand accounts that I can bring back, maybe I can cash in my own credibility in some way to try to help people be grounded in a more realistic perception of Israel and Israelis and this war and everything that's happening. But it's super complex to try to figure out what of this is for me, what means something to me, what can mean something to other people. And so many of these experiences, I mean, you were probably there at the Nova site, Rain Forest, and these different places. And there's like soul matter attached to those memories and those photos. And I feel like I don't want to just put those out there on social media and have somebody immediately trafe the memory of those victims with ridiculous, what about sort of comments.
Right. Our group did actually not go to the Nova site. We went to, I think the day you were at the Nova site, we were at Nativ HaSarah, which is right on the Gaza border. And it was, we were being guided through by somebody who grew up there, whose parents were part of the founders of that moshav, and she sort of framed it as, we're going to walk the path that the terrorists walked.
Wow.
And so she pointed to a tree that was broken because that's where one of the hang gliders, motorized hang gliders that they took over the border into Israel crashed into.
Yeah.
And it's still there broken.
Yeah.
And we can see the bullet holes in the trees from where a shootout happened.
Right.
And she was very stone-faced the whole time through, and I think part of that is to protect her own mental health and well-being. But it's, it went from a thriving farming community of 300 families and 1,000 odd people to a military installation right now.
Right.
On the border, and as she's talking, we can hear the echoes of gunfire and artillery fire, not at us, but Gaza's right there.
Right.
And it's a lot to hold.
It is.
When you're there. And I totally understand the idea of not wanting to sully the memories and invite people to put horrible things on. Because I think, and I don't know if it's the case for the people you spoke with, but I know the people that we spoke with understand they don't want this situation, and they're extremely angry at the government for a lot of things that's going on right now. And it's a they're holding so much pain and so much agony and so much frustration that it just feels so impossible to move forward in so many ways.
And yet, I was with Heilicher, and the word she used was like resignation, which has sometimes a negative connotation, but it's also like resigned to the fact that this is our path. We have to fight this war, and there may be more war. We talked to soldiers who said for sure there will be war in the north, for sure. Yeah. And so people are seeing that it's not going to be over in 2 months or 6 months or maybe even a year, and all of that means. So everybody we talked to, though, I don't know, it was the same with your delegation, but they couldn't believe we were there, number one, during this time. Yeah. And they were extremely grateful that we were there. So one of my big takeaways was if it's at all possible, people should go to Israel, soon, now, within the next couple months. I mean, assuming it's, paying attention to safety protocols and all those sorts of things, but it's the support is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't come across a person who wasn't grateful that we were there. It wasn't so much disbelief. It was just, they were, what's the right word? I think they were happy to see us and to talk to us and for us to hear their stories, because it touched everybody. And it's what happens in a really small country like that.
Right.
Everybody was affected in some way or another.
For sure.
Everybody knows somebody. Everybody's got a relative who had, from reserves that had to get called up, or, somebody had to get back to base early on a Saturday because of what was going on. So it touched everyone that
Right.
we came across.
Yeah, even example at the Nova site, I mean, our security guard who was with us the entire time, he went and showed us, there's all these trees now. So almost 400 people who were murdered there. Mm-hmm. Now there's a tree planted for each person. And each of those trees has become its own mini memorial with that person's picture, and people come and light candles, do whatever. So he showed us one tree which was dedicated to his friend who was killed there. And even as he's explaining that to us, a woman comes up and they're talking and says, "Oh, I'm the cousin of this man."
Oh,
so it's
wow.
it's just like that all the time.
Yeah, it's played Jewish geography and everything, but like it's so much smaller.
Yep.
It's so much tighter knit.
Right.
Especially I think in moments like this where the country does pull together in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's still a lot of angst over a whole lot of things, and I think that's the sign of somewhat healthy democracy.
Right.
But there should be angst. I mean, nobody should enjoy this.
Yeah.
It's like, for like for months, and you probably came across this too, for months after October 7th. Like, oh, or at least weeks. How are you? How's it going? It's like, how do you answer that?
Yeah.
I mean, well, except for this horrible thing, yeah, I guess everything's okay,
Totally.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in fundraising, so it's like I'm doing outreach all the time.
Right.
And I had to totally rethink salutations and all that. It's like, hope you're doing well in a time like this, or hope you're doing as best as can be in these circumstances.
I mean, in being in philanthropy and in fundraising, that had to be a whole other challenge, I would think.
Definitely.
In the, when is it okay to do this?
Right.
Because obviously you're at a nonprofit, you're at a nonprofit educational facility, you're at a day school where you do have to raise money. Like that is, the school is dependent on that.
Yeah,
and
very,
at some
very
point,
high touch, yeah.
And at some point, it's like it feels very uncouth, but you also have to move forward in some way.
Right. Yeah. So our annual benefit was November 19th.
Yeah.
So, October 7th, it's like right after that, it's like high time for like finishing up sponsorships, RSVPs, all these sorts of things. And it was touch and go every single day. We're like, what do we need to like totally change? Like, do we need to send all this money we're raising to Israel? Do we need to whatever? But, at that time, I think people had come around to seeing like the second front in the battle. It's like here, it's all of our communities. And I mean, I'm so thankful for all of our donors who recognize that now is a time to double down on Jewish education and Jewish identity, because it's at a place like this, at Heilicher, where we're forming, making sure that those kids grow up to be confident, connected, knowledgeable Jewish people, Jewish leaders who can hold their own on a college campus or wherever they're going to be like inundated with that like crazy conversation coming at them, whether they want it or not.
Right. Was the decision for, so I guess this year's 7th graders, the next year's 8th grade class to go to Israel, was that decision made since October 7th?
Way before.
Way before, okay.
Way before, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, that was another thing. But thank goodness we weren't going this February. Actually, like, they would be there this time right now. Like,
oh, wow.
Next year.
Okay.
But I felt it was incredibly secure and safe where we were.
Yeah.
But, I don't know that maybe it was a little too close, but we had planned it for February 2025 the entire time.
Okay.
So we just had to kind of monitor and message and make sure our parents and our community knew that, like, obviously we're going to do whatever's in the best, safest interest of the kids and everything. But by then we expect Israel will need the tourism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that's a huge part of the economy. And to have that solidarity, so long as it's safe, I think will be really important.
Yeah. So you're relatively new to the day school?
Yeah, coming up on 1 year in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it that brought you to Heilicher and to the Twin Cities?
Twin Cities, love, basically. I mean, my wife is from here.
Okay.
We were in Madison. She was finishing up her doctorate program
Okay.
at UW, and she got an offer she couldn't refuse at the VA hospital, where they're helping to pay off her student loans and all that sort of thing. So you got to take that.
Got to take
especially
that,
with-
yes.
Yeah, the grandparents are in the area, the aunties are in the area,
Nice.
and at that point we had one kid and maybe one on the way. And we just saw where that was going. Like, we're going to need help. Madison's great. Like, we never would have left Madison if not for the need for extra hands on deck.
For sure.
So that's what brought us to the Twin Cities 4 years ago.
Okay.
But I was running a family foundation based in Chicago. So I was really like remote and like back and forth between here and Chicago.
Okay.
And I wasn't halakhically Jewish at that time. So my wife, our 3 kids were all converts. That's to say I wasn't plugged into the community here whatsoever.
Okay.
But we were thinking about where will our daughter go to kindergarten, starting to get that lined up. I was a public school kid.
Yeah.
I thought all my life, my kids will go to public school. I'm like a public guy. I'm a man of the people. You
Yeah.
know? But it's just not like that anymore. And all the violence you see at schools, school shootings, all that sort of thing, just didn't feel right. So we were thinking, okay, we're going to send our kid to like private Catholic school. Like we tried going to some masses and things like that to see like, can we get the parishioner discount or whatever? Nobody liked it. Nobody liked it. That's great. If that's good for other people, we weren't feeling it. And so we took a tour of Heilicher, and it was actually Deb Getzig, before any of this road we've been on for the last year. And we loved it. And we had decided then, even before becoming halakhically Jewish, that we were going to send our kids here. If they'd admit us and all that sort of thing. So that's what made us start thinking about it. And then I knew it had been a long time through COVID, even before COVID, that I was like living and working in the same community. I was doing remote for a long time. And I thought, I wonder how it would be now if I had that experience of, seeing like the fruits of my labor in the community where I live and I'm raising my kids, and the job for development director at Heilicher opened up. So I just saw all of that aligning.
Yeah.
Threw my hat in the ring. Board president Robin Shine, she's somebody I knew from like the family foundation days back in Chicago.
Very nice. Yeah.
Not very well, but enough to think like, there's another star aligning. So I threw my hat in the ring, went through the interviews, got the job. Here I am.
So you've said a few times now, mentioned not being halakhically Jewish.
Yeah.
Were you not halakhically Jewish before?
No, I was.
So
raised,
what was the?
Yeah. I was raised West Central Indiana, Bible Belt.
Sure.
It wasn't fundamentalist, but like more on the literalist Christianity side.
Okay.
And that's how all my mom's side of the family is. They're like rural folk. My grandpa was a watermelon farmer and school principal. My dad's from South Bend, Indiana, big Polish Catholic community,
Sure.
and that's how he was raised. But all my life I've been a theologically inclined guy, asking all the questions like, why am I here? Who made this? Who made me? What's my purpose? What's the best use of this life?
Yeah.
So I was just poking relentlessly on the tradition that I grew up in. And my whole working career since college, I've been working in and around Jewish people and Jewish organizations, which I always loved. It always felt so good to me. But, I'm like Larry Bird. I'm like a hick from French Lick. Like, one doesn't just become Jewish, right? Like, like you're born into it. Like, that's how I thought of it.
Okay.
Anyway. So things happened. There's a whole woozy story that I could tell about like the dominoes that started to fall. And I don't know how woozy this podcast is, Lonnie. So you'll have to, give me the green light or not. But,
Okay. So but first, are you actually from French Lick?
No.
Okay.
I'm from Terre Haute.
Okay.
But
Indiana State University,
exactly
which is where Larry Bird went.
Exactly. And we're good again this year. People should pay attention to the Sycamores.
Yes, they're very good this year. the might be the best win my Michigan State Spartans have this year is beating Indiana State.
That's right.
All right, we'll get off college basketball though. Okay, I am interested in the story though. At least what I guess lots. I mean, look, there's a lot of religions out there.
Yeah.
What was the draw?
There are a lot of religions, and I explored many of them.
Okay.
You know, like even back in high school, I would go over to my friend's house who was from India, and I would read his Bhagavad Gita, and he would read my Bible, and then we would like discuss. You know,
Wow.
so it's always this exchange. But what I always loved about Judaism was the expansiveness and its tolerance of questions and the wide range of beliefs, which seems like the right approach to life. I mean, nobody knows what's going on here. We're all just taking our best guess, you know. But I had the experience of working around Holocaust survivors for like 15 years, you know.
Oh wow!
So I learned a lot of their stories, and although I don't think any of them intentionally tried to make me Jewish per se, they were always like, "Oh, you're Jewish, you know, we know you're Jewish because of, I guess, my allyship or whatever." But I learned from them, like by osmosis or whatever, that Judaism is, to me, it's like the height of spiritual and communal technology. It's like, you know, these survivors, what they went through, it showed to me that Judaism is the most resilient, the most durable, the most beautiful, the most countercultural wisdom tradition that I know about that's available to me, and it made perfect sense to me. So my wife and I, when we started having kids, we thought, you know, we'd love to raise our kids in a community, as part of a community, and to be conversant with spirituality and ethics and all that sort of thing. We wanted to raise them in the Jewish community, but again, neither of us were raised Jewish. So it's like, how, I guess we'll just like be fans, you know, like we'll come, you know, somebody will invite us and like we'll make our way into a kiddish lunch or something here and there. But it was our daughter at a young age. We went to an event. It was a Jew folk event, Lonnie. I forgot about this.
Oh.
It was, a couple years ago.
Oh, at Minnesota Hillel, yeah, or
exactly,
Folk Fest.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And we all had a good time. My daughter, who's at that time in the age of temper tantrums, had such a good time she didn't want to leave. So I was carrying her out as she's like screaming down that like majestic stairwell, and it's reverberating. You know, I'm like forcibly strapping her into her car seat, and she's screaming at me, "I'm Jewish, Dad, I'm Jewish." And it's like it's not like we had ever talked about being Jewish or anything with her, you know? So that was really remarkable. And I learned from child survivors of the Holocaust, believe kids. You should believe kids. So we thought, okay, we'll take you to a synagogue and see what we all think about that experience. We have friends, Michelle and Neville Basman, who are members of Adath, and they said, you should come. Just come on a Shabbat morning, see what you think. Actually, I think we went to a Tat Shabbat the night before.
Yeah.
And immediately Rabbi Kravitz came up and introduced himself. Rabbi Weininger was next, and then Chazan Dolkin was next. Just such a warm feeling. Like, I thought we were going to step in and like the record would zip and everybody would look at the entrance like, you know, who are these people who just walked in? And we'd immediately like break 1,000 rules and whatever and be carried out, you know. But it wasn't like that at all. It was such a warm, wonderful experience. So we came back the next morning to a Shabbat service. Then we're invited to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Next thing we know, we're signing up for Intro to Judaism. And they're like, oh, if you're taking that, you should probably learn some Hebrew too. So we're in Intro to Hebrew. And it was like the first class for us, done. Like,
you're in.
Yeah, we're
it.
in. I mean, I was even writing like in the margins of the handout, like this confirms everything I had intuited like all my life. So when I say like became halakhically Jewish, like people ask like when they find out you're a convert, like, oh, when did you become Jewish? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I guess like I started taking a class like a year and a half ago or whatever, but I can look at the events of my life and see it all conspiring like the whole way through. So it just depends on how you tell the story, you know?
As somebody who is born and raised in it and was a day school kid myself, you know, growing up in Michigan, the why, someone else's why is fascinating to me. Because, you know, I'm born into it.
Yeah, you didn't have to choose it.
I didn't have to, I mean, I could choose lots of things, but I haven't. You chose this, which I find is fascinating to me in a lot of ways, but also really inspiring too. Because you didn't, like you said, you're always, thought of yourself, you're a spiritual guy.
Yeah.
And there's lots of paths you could have taken, lots of paths you looked at, but like this was the one you and your family have settled on. And I think that's really neat.
Yeah. And, the thing was, we really had a moment of reckoning because our formal conversion, like mikveh immersion in St. Paul, everything we converted into the conservative movement. Okay. So we went the whole route, wrote essays, appeared before a Beit Din. And we finished all of that, mikveh dunk, a month before October 7th. So then all of this starts happening, not just in Israel, but here. And my wife and I are asking ourselves, like, my God, like, did we do right by our children mainly? We've given them the identity that they will now carry. And was that the right thing to do? Did we have the right to decide that for them?
Yeah.
For me, maybe, of course, everybody has their own way of rationalizing, but for me, like, I never thought for a second we made the wrong decision. Like, I cast my lot with Jewish people because of everything I believe to my core and everything I feel and know to be true to my core. So this is where I want to be, and this fight is the fight that I want to be in, and I feel I'm on the side that I want to be on.
Also, it sounds like it's your daughter maybe that helped lead you guys down this path as much as you and your wife leading your children down this path.
Yeah, it's just funny, how like a kid opens the door, and it's just like I never could have predicted that it would unfold that way. Right. But that's like I'm a theistic guy, like a space theist. Like I don't know. I mean, maybe it's at least in the good things, the things that conspire for good, because also I've studied the Holocaust and like how do you reckon with that from a theological perspective, but at least when the good things are happening, I like to attribute it to Hashem. It's like life is more fun that way.
Sure, absolutely. How did you end up in the sort of philanthropic spaces that you've occupied in your career? How did this become the road you traveled?
So I was a history major.
Okay.
Always loved to write and communicate, think, whatever, meet with people, etc., just to get to know people's stories. All of that comes in handy in the world of fundraising, but really I learned it all on the job because in my hometown there's a small Holocaust museum founded by a lady named Eva Kor, who survived Mengele's experiments at Auschwitz as a child. And she started like a little mom and pop museum in the memory of her sister. Her twin sister is the only one from her family who survived. And her museum was firebombed and totally destroyed when I was an undergrad history major at Indiana State. So I was conscripted basically as an intern to help develop exhibits for the new museum. He was operating on a shoestring. So I was doing oral histories of people in our area who had connections to the Holocaust, and I was researching West Central Indiana. I don't know if you've been there, Lonnie. Have you been there?
I've possibly driven through at some point on my way south on a family road trip.
Okay.
But that's been a lot of time.
You went to the Cracker Barrel or something.
I wouldn't have surprised me.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's not a hotbed of like Jewish life. There's a Reformed congregation there, wonderful people, love them. But most of the people that I was researching were in the U.S. Army as liberators. They were in liberating battalions.
Oh, fascinating.
So I was researching one guy. My dad's dad had died before I was born. And so I didn't know much about him. Mm-hmm. I knew that he was in the European theater, and from the National Archives, I called my dad, like as I'm reading all these after-action reports of this liberating battalion, and I'm like, now I'm really curious what my grandfather experienced. So I called my dad and was like, what's the infantry and regiment, division and battalion, all that stuff that he was in? And I wrote it down, and as I was writing it down, I like got all the way to the end, and I realized that I was researching the exact same battalion my grandfather was in, which is, the battalion is a small unit.
Yeah.
So I was basically researching my own grandfather's story. He was a liberator, and this whole epic of the Holocaust became more personally meaningful at that moment. So I asked this lady, can I start working with you for your museum, which just reopened, it was burned down in 2003, reopened in 2005. So I said, can I start working with you? And I was basically the first full-time person hired. The budget was like $60,000. She was like, cleaning the bathrooms and like filing the 990 report herself. So she needed all the help she could get.
Yeah.
She was like, can you write a press release? Can you, she's not a native English speaker. So my proofreading ability, instant knockout, big
Nice.
hit. So I just started out like cleaning bathrooms, editing the website, whatever I could to be useful, build trust, and learn on the job. And quickly it became not about history, not about exhibits, although I did curate and whatever, but it was about fundraising and making sure that this institution that this remarkable lady founded would last past her for generations to come. And so much of that is rooted in board development, organizational development, fundraising. So that's how I got into it.
Got it.
And when you're I've been in the nonprofit world pretty much my whole career as an adult post-college. And if you want to create social change at scale, you've got to learn how to fundraise.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, no, absolutely. My boss likes to say that everybody can be a fundraiser.
It's true.
And I firmly believe that's true. I don't know how to, part of it is knowing how to do it. And
there's a little bit of science, but mostly it's like art of people.
Right. And that's sort of the conversations and getting to hear their stories. And that's the part that I really like about not just like sitting here and doing this podcast every week, but also just the interviews I get to do and the hearing people, whether I'm hearing people talk about what they've done since October 7th in Israel and how they've, the folks from civil society there are working to try to make things better for everybody in Israel.
Right.
Or just the people doing the, important everyday work here in the Twin Cities. That's the best part of my job is getting to learn from those folks.
Totally.
And talk to them.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like if you're in this space, nonprofit, but also fundraising in particular, it helps. Like I'm a giver by nature. Like I'm always trying to give my time, like give money, whatever. And I think that's the spirit that like you can be most successful with fundraising. So like even, talking to these people, we had Shabbat dinner in Israel with 3 young people as part of a bigger group who were at Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. Mm-hmm. And one of them who's, I don't know, he's got to be 22 years old or something like that. Now he's in charge of fundraising for the kibbutz because they've got all this rebuilding to do. So I'm like, let's trade contact information. I'd love to be able to help. That's because really it's not about the money. It's like what you're trying to build, like what world we're trying to build.
Right. It's amazing. You never know when your expertise is able to help somebody else somewhere else.
Yep, totally. One I forgot to mention too. I'm sure it's gonna be hard to weave this in, but when we first went to Adath, Nitza Shir was one of the first people we met, and that was like a Beshert moment because of her parents' experience with the Holocaust, and she's one of the first people I met. She's a St. Paul community concierge, so she was helping get us plugged in. She's been like our fairy godmother this whole time.
She is excellent at connecting people.
She is, yeah.
She is the one who connected you and I for this pod.
Mm-hmm.
She is an excellent connector.
Yeah, something's working through her.
She knows everyone. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's astounding. Well, Kiel, last couple questions, and we will let you get back to it. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, favorite Jewish holiday. Wow. Boy.
I know this might feel like a sort of a weird question. I'm stalling for you a little bit here.
Yeah.
In part because as somebody who, a convert, you have not, because of the timing of it, you have not experienced all of the holidays as a member of the Jewish community, as a full halachic member of the community yet.
Right. Yeah, I gotta say it's got to be Pesach. There's so many to choose from, but Pesach, the whole spirit of liberation and collective memory from generation to generation, it's just such an inspiring holiday. It's fantastic.
And the way you answered it ties into so much of your work and your story through the years too.
Right, totally.
And what's your favorite Jewish food?
Oh, boy. I think it's got to be, right now, it's hard to beat shakshuka.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because, it's hard for us to make at home. Like we don't have the shakshuka pan or whatever. So it just seems like one of those things we can't do for ourselves.
And fresh off a trip to Israel where it's like readily available at breakfast.
Dr. Shakshuka, we met. Do you know about Dr. Shakshuka?
No.
He's got a place. And we met the doctor himself.
Did you?
I think it's not an official PhD, but.
Probably not. Or an MD, but.
I think he's got other credentials.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Well, Kiel Majewski, thank you so much for joining me this week. It was great to spend more than 30 seconds in the middle of Tel Aviv with you to talk about your experiences and your trip. But thank you for joining me, and best of luck.
Yeah. Hey, Lonnie, I want to say, too, thank you for having me. Not only thanks for having me, but thanks for the amazing work of TC Jewfolk over the last however many months. I mean, you guys are out there every day. Just really appreciate the coverage you guys have been giving for the community.
You're incredibly kind. Thank you. I know it's certainly not far from just me. We have a whole team of us that have been working incredibly hard. It is a challenging time for all of us in the Jewish nonprofit space. Yeah. But I, speaking on behalf of all of my colleagues, thank you for that. We deeply appreciate your support and readership. Thank you.
Of course.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network and a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.